we're going to do some absolutely free and unpaid for promotion for Amazon Prime's hit new show, Fallout, of course, based on the iconic video game franchise of the same name, currently in the occasionally safe hands of Bethesda. The show dropped last week, Jonesy. Actually dropped slightly earlier than anticipated in the end, with an entire bingeable season, which in itself became another topic of debate, that released on April 10th. And the positive news is that whether you're looking at kind of audience reception through kind of the word of mouth and what people are saying on social media, or whether you look at critical reception on sites like Rotten Tomatoes, things are looking pretty positive. The Rotten Tomatoes score at the moment is on 93% approval from, I think, over 90 critics. And again, I don't know if yours has been quite the same, but if your Twitter or your X has been remotely similar to mine, you've been inundated with people who are happily telling you how good the show is, and happily admitting that they have enough time to watch 8+ hours of television in like the first 2 to 3 days after a show's release. Which that's the part of me that always shocks me. I'm like, I see a tweet and I'm like, didn't that show come out last night? Like, what do you people do with your lives?
And you've just admitted that online and for your employer to see that you spent all of last night until the wee hours of the morning watching a show.
Yeah, I don't know. I was under the impression that people had jobs to do jobs, but I guess not necessarily a blanket statement that one can make anymore. And as such, you and I believe I'm right in saying at the time of recording, have only seen 2 episodes each. Is that still accurate?
Yes, I will say as well that we will not be spoiling anything. We will not be talking anything story-wise. Nothing to worry about any of that. We have both only seen 2 episodes anyway. We have no intention of giving away anything, even from those.
And despite being an 8-episode run, there's not even a huge amount you can give away from the first 2 episodes, because there's a lot of kind of build up and a lot of establishing the world and establishing the premise of this first season, which of course isn't based on any existing game within the Fallout franchise. It is an original story set in the world of Fallout, featuring up to the so far at least, with the exception of perhaps one animal, original characters. Your thoughts so far, I guess, Jonesy, on the first 2 episodes?
I'm loving so the thing for me that I was really hoping would be there, and we kind of knew from the trailers, was going to be like the cinematic side of it. Fallout has always been a very cinematic game and has always sort of captured the world that they were trying to put across really well. And I feel they've absolutely nailed it with the look and the style, like the vaults, the world outside of that. I think they've done a really good job from what I've seen so far. I will say some of like maybe the CGI leaves a little bit to be desired in some instances, but I kind of think that's not necessarily a bad thing based on the subject matter anyway. Like, because it's the whole thing about Fallout is this 1950s derived future, and so if some things seem a little bit kind of like wonky or jank from that side of it, it kind of fits with the aesthetic. Like, it's not supposed to look super grungy, super like dark, dingy and brooding. There is like a fun to Fallout, as you know, everyone probably already knows. Immediately I'm 2 episodes in, really enjoying it. Think it's very, very good TV and very good Fallout fodder.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I definitely think they've kind of they've nailed a lot of the core components of going into it. I think it's always interesting when you get an adaptation of a video game for another medium, especially when it's either TV or film, because we've seen so many different approaches to it. And I think what's increasingly becoming the case, whether you look at Fallout, which is a pretty, it's a good, and what's the word I'm looking for, kind of, not strict, but like it adheres a lot to the lore established by the game by the series, in terms of how it's been adapted. But it applies that to the world and kind of the logic and the tone and sensibilities of Fallout, as opposed to any particular storyline or character thread that exists within the games. But then you get something like The Last of Us, which is a far more rigid adaptation of that game's original source material, with some liberties taken in other places. Then you get into like Arcane, which I haven't watched, but it appears to be like on another end of the spectrum entirely relative to the source material. And I think what the picture that is being painted to me is the more sort of successful adaptations of video game series that we're getting, is that actually video game fans and fans of the series that are being adapted maybe aren't as like pedantic and whiny and whingy as we were made out to be, as the Assassin's Creed and Resident Evils and Dooms and Tomb Raiders of the world were releasing and crashing and burning in often quite spectacular fashion. And we don't need to see the worlds that we love or the characters we've loved adapted with 100% precision. We just want to see a kind of a care for and a love for those worlds and those ideas that we feel, and we want to feel like that it's being handled by, and the vision is being directed by people who have that same affection and affinity for these worlds that we do, even if the specifics get changed up, because at the end of the day, you're still dealing with producers, executives, budgets. Some things need to change.
Agreed. I think with something like this, for me, the important thing is if you're getting the feel right and the aesthetics right and the world building right, then I'm not too bothered about the lore around it. I think it's more difficult, as you say, with something like The Last of Us, when you're attempting to word for word almost recreate and put on screens something that people have already seen in a game. I'm less thrilled when they change things in that type of format. So, for example, like there was a very good episode, but with Last of Us, when they did the whole thing with Bill, and then they fundamentally like changed some of the character arcs around. I get why they did it, for cinematics, for the TV side of it. But what I wasn't a big fan of that. Like, I didn't really understand the necessity to do that, like and to fundamentally change characters is a bit off. But again, like as you said, this is not that. This is taking a brand new set of Vault Dwellers, a brand new part of the world, and sort of saying these are all characters in inverted commas, because they're types of characters that you've seen before. They're archetypes that you've seen in the Fallout series, and we're going to extrapolate on them and have fun with those characters. And as long as they stick to the rough lore of the world, I think they can absolutely go ham and do what they want and create something really special. I think it's actually much harder when you try and do what they did with The Last of Us, and you try and do a really faithful adaptation, because people forget that a lot of video games, a lot of what you do in a video game is just, you can't put it on screen, because you can't have someone walking around for 15 hours in one location, like looking in bags and taking out people. Like, you've got to condense that. So it's got to be a lot easier to sort of synthesize something at your own.
Which is why it's always interesting when key creative personnel from the video game side of things are involved in the other mediums as well. Because then, as is the case with Neil Druckmann's involvement in writing and even in some cases directing episodes of The Last of Us TV show, because then are you almost getting an admission of, hey, this is territory we would have liked to explore, but we couldn't because of the nature of the video game. Like, you couldn't have an hour-long episode about Bill, or squeeze all of Bill's life story into, collectibles that has people were picking up and reading in the game.
Yeah, so absolutely.
Is it an admission of like, this is something I wanted to do and couldn't do? It's always interesting, but I think it's going to vary from case to case. Like, I think Fallout was a very strong candidate for, and we're seeing evidence of the fact that, that was the case. Something where, like you said, you could take the world, you could take the themes, you could take the ideas, you could take, and the tone is massive, as you said, kind of that something that's not afraid of being occasionally larger than life and funny and maybe a little bit gross and all of that kind of stuff. Whereas, Metal Gear Solid adaptations are being talked about an awful lot. There'd be absolutely no sense in creating a TV series based in the world of Metal Gear Solid that, for example, didn't have any semblance of a snake in there, for example. There'd be no sense in that. But Fallout, it makes sense.
It does. And not to mention the fact that every Fallout game, they do it anyway.
Right, exactly.
So it's fine.
New city or environment, new characters.
So based on just the first two episodes, I really liked how I felt they included some of the aspects of how it feels to play the game, insofar as, for example, there was some use of slow motion, which for me felt like VATS, felt like they were basically going, look, it's VATS. There was a bit where the main character looks at a knife and then looks at a weapon on the floor, and I'm like, oh, this is pure RPG of me considering whether or not I'm going to ditch my current weapon and pick up. But they did it in a subtle way that it spoke to me, but it didn't feel too they didn't lay it on too thick. Because, for example, in the Doom movie, when it goes first person and suddenly it's just so shonky, and you obviously it's like a bit of fun, but I just think that was something that probably might put off some people if they had never played Doom. I don't feel like what they've done in the series would put anyone off. Like, did you feel some of those bits? Did you like it? Did you not?
Yeah, I think I liked it. I don't think, and I suppose this is in some respects a testament to the sort of success of the way that they were implemented. But I don't think any one of those moments or kind of sequences or ideas ever kind of took me out of the experience and made me go, "Oh,
Exactly,
this is
yeah.
them clearly making a nod to that." Like, I'll be honest, like you mentioned, VATS. This is a very minor spoiler. For it's not even a spoiler at all. It's just I've seen 2 episodes, and to my mind, I was still kind of thinking, oh, they haven't alluded to VATS directly yet at any one point. I wonder if they will.
Oh, right.
But
Yeah.
as you pointed out, like the heavy use of slow motion, and of course, like there's a one shootout sequence where it almost feels as though like some of the angles they take up, the use of slow motion, and the emphasis on particularly gory dismemberment feels straight out of those VAT style executions, like where that final bullet just rips through someone's head and splits it like a fucking pineapple. They make very liberal use of that bullet tracking stuff. In the same way that VATS would occasionally do it when VATS got extremely cinematic, as you mentioned earlier. So yeah, you're right. That could be a befitting stand-in for it. But I think that stuff works quite seamlessly because so much of what the show has presented in the first 2 episodes, it has been, if it's not a reference to like a mechanic or like an RPG-esque idea, it's a reference to that world, and it's a world that I think so many of us have become almost familiar with accidentally just by virtue of playing so many of these games and spending so long in these worlds, that when, even if it's as simple as the things that they were obviously going to do, like stim packs and rad roaches, or like the weird sort of design on some of the handguns, the 9mm and 10mm handguns, every time something like that pops up, you're like the first time you see like a Pip-Boy being fired up and GPS coordinates being plugged into it, you're just like, oh, this feels weird but kind of cool. And of course it was going to do that, but it's still just unique seeing those things brought to life in a different medium.
So one thing that I heard, as you said, I saw a lot of praise for the series, and I saw a lot of people saying, actually, and as we'll talk about, it sort of blew open again the sort of conversation about Fallout as a franchise, not just the TV series. I did hear some people complaining and saying they didn't like the TV series. I heard, as we always hear with everything now, I did hear some people say, and I've not finished it, so I can't really comment on this, but I did hear the word, of course, you have to hear the word, oh, it's gone woke, which I'm like, okay, I don't know what that's a reference to. I've not seen anything like that, and I don't know what that's in reference to. I did also see some people, or someone criticizing it, saying it's almost like too inside baseball with Fallout, and that if you weren't a fan of the series, you'd struggle to follow what was going on. But 2 episodes, I have no idea what they're talking about, if I'm being honest. I'll tell you what might do is I might wait until I've watched all 8 episodes and then grill my wife about whether she has understood everything, because as far like we've watched it together so far, and she's not there's nothing she's been like, I don't understand this. And so when I heard someone say, oh no, if you haven't seen the series, you have to keep sort of explaining to people what's going on. Like, I don't really understand why they feel that at all at the moment. Like, it's very obvious what's going on, and I think they've done a good job of introducing things. I don't think it's confusing at all. But hey, maybe that remains.
I agree with you. No, I'd be curious to hear what your wife has to say and all of that, and kind of what the litmus test there is like for kind of how easy it would be for someone from the complete outside to. But I think most of what is potentially, I don't know, for want of a better way of putting it, confusing about the show, it isn't that it's too inside baseball, that there are references to kind of like ideas or, things from Fallout that people who hadn't played the games wouldn't get. It's just that it takes a kind of a somewhat interesting 3-pronged approach to its storytelling, at least in the early stages, or how it kind of gets the ball rolling with all of the story arcs, which means you jump around a few different locations. And I could see maybe someone who has absolutely no idea about Fallout going like, hang on a second, when we were in the vault, it kind of seemed like the vault was it, and now we're kind of very much on the surface, and like, is the whole world like an irradiated wasteland? And if so, why are these people just walking around on the surface normally? It's like, well, no, it's some parts are radiated and some parts aren't, and there are people on the surface, there were people, and but you just have to watch it, and then everything kind of explains itself. I can't speak to the woke part. I mean, I know there's a trans actor who features quite prominently in the first episode or 2, but that's about. But their character as like the other than looking slightly genderly ambiguous, and I wasn't 100% sure what they were at first, and then I realized that there's what they are has nothing to do with the story.
It's irrelevant anyway, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Like I get it.
Absolutely nothing.
I get when people say like they don't like that sort of thing when it's like when it's forced into stuff and then rammed in your face. But yeah, I haven't seen anything like that at all. Like, there's none of that at all. No,
exactly.
So from that, if you've heard any of that criticism, you haven't seen the show. I've not seen anything like that yet. So I'm not really sure where that critique. But then everyone says that about everything these days. So
did you see the picture going around on social media in the past week of two thumbnails side by side? And one was, two images side by side. One was a thumbnail from the build-up to the release of the show where a guy had criticised it for going woke and presumably he assumed eventually going broke. And the other was a screenshot of the tweet that he had done after he'd finished watching the show, calling it 9 out of 10 and saying it was amazing.
Oh, no, I hadn't seen that, no.
That's how these grifters operate. Like, yeah.
Did you see there was one, I did see a thing where someone had artificially altered the main actress's ass.
Yes, I did see that, but that felt like more of the kind of the.
I was so much because they just said
Stella Blade stop making women unattractive. The women in Star Wars Outlaws is ugly. Video games are doomed. Kind of crowd. That
was a bit weird. Like I was like, oh, it's okay. Someone's had a bit of fun with this. They've just changed their ask to make it look a bit more. Yeah, Stella Bladey. They were just having a bit of fun with it, and then a lot of people got annoyed because apparently they were like, "Don't do that. You should be changing stuff." Like, oh, come on, man. They're just having a bit of fun. Like, leave them alone. But...
Oh, see, I'm between the two. On the one hand, yeah, like don't get annoyed.
It was a dumb picture. Like it looked ridiculous. What they done.
On the other hand, like I think it's not just having a bit of fun. That's proper virgin like behavior. Like if you did that,
I wouldn't do it.
And message to me and Chris, I'd be like, Jonesy, like don't post it. That's proper. Virgin,
no. I meant like it was. I'm assuming it was like some kids having a bit of fun, like going, look what I've done, like that kind of level. And I'm like, it's one of those things where you wouldn't even stop scrolling to look at it. Like you wouldn't even be like. It wouldn't even impact you, but the fact that some people were sort of talking about it, I was like, is this really what we're doing? We're really going to talk about this? But
you just gave me a proper old man shouts at cloud moment where I was like, I thought kids having fun was like throwing bricks through a window and shit like that, not editing.
Throwing bricks through windows.
Maybe. Yeah, that's maybe. 12-year-old me wasn't like ganging up with her mates going, let's have a laugh by editing the size of a woman's arse on this picture.
I assume that's what they do now. They don't go out, they don't drink, they don't meet up. So what they've got to do something else, haven't they?
They just edit the sizes of women's as arse and tits and pictures and play Roblox. Apparently, that's it.
That is it.
But they're not playing Roblox at the moment, Jonesy. They're actually playing other games, and increasingly they're playing games in a little series called Fallout. Stop me if you've heard of it. Basically. And you always expect this to happen to a certain extent, but it seems to be happening maybe a little bit more than perhaps some people anticipated. Everything Fallout related has kind of been on fire following, and the good kind of fire, if there is such a thing, following the launch of the show. One thing that was actually confirmed even prior to the launch of season 1, but I think just hits home how successful they were expecting it to be and how they kind of backed the right horse on this one, was the news that Variety reported of the show being renewed for a second season. Again, we haven't finished season 1, so we don't know if there are kind of cliffhangers or things that need to be wrapped up in a second season, but we know we're getting one, so something to look forward to in, I don't know, however many years, but not anytime soon. But the show's popularity is, of course, in turn helping the games. And the pretty much across the board, Jonesy, have seen a large increase in concurrent player counts. And that's on Steam because in the space of a couple of days, those are the easiest ways to gauge, whether things are chopped and changing. We don't have like sales reports or anything like that. So if I'll just walk you through some of the kind of the, without spoiling too much, let's start with the console and let's start with the Steam-based numbers before I get into another note that I found during some research for all this, just to kind of get it all out there. The biggest leap so far has actually been enjoyed by Fallout 4, which apparently prior to this weekend was regularly hitting around 20 to 24,000 players, and that's in the past 6 months, and that's as a peak, but saw a peak of 83,491 on Sunday, so more than tripling its normal player count. Also on the note of Fallout 4, Bethesda have confirmed that the long-awaited next-gen patch for that game on consoles, namely the PS5 and the Xbox Series X and S, will arrive later this month on April 25th. So if you're a console player who has yet to ever play Fallout 4 at 60 frames a second, you can do so in around 9 days' time. Hopefully the furore and the fever won't have died down quite yet by that point. But Fallout 76 was also a bit of a success story and saw a large jump in numbers, shooting up from a 3-month best of around 13,000 players to 39,455 on Sunday, breaking its all-time peak concurrent player count. Fallout New Vegas, Fallout 3 Game of the Year edition, also, like hitting, beating their concurrent averages by many multiples. It's whatever they're doing, it's working, Jonesy. People are watching the show, they're getting a taste for the Fallout world and saying, man, I've got to go and play one of those games again, and slinking back in to their favorites. Or at least I would say, Mike, you conclude that they're sinking back into their favorites, were it not for the large increase in players of Fallout 76, which beguiles me somewhat, but what do you make of it all?
I totally get it. Like, it's one of the first things I wanted to do was hop in and play some Fallout 4. Like, it made me want to go back. But what you blow my mind a little bit in the sense of there's a regular weekend concurrent of 20 to 24,000 people playing Fallout 4 anyway, which I'm like, wow, that
doesn't surprise me too much.
Okay,
it's still the most recent single player entry, still the most recent mainline entry in some people's opinions in one of the biggest RPG franchises in the world. Like 20,000 people sitting down to play Fallout 4 on an average weekend.
That's madness, isn't it? Is it not? Okay. That I don't know. I feel like
apparently not.
I tell you what's dumb. I own 2 copies of Fallout 4 because I played it on my PlayStation, but then I wanted to play it in VR, and so I played it, and that was wicked. Like, I loved playing in VR. I only ever played, I think, maximum about 10 hours of Fallout 4, which I immediately, on watching this show, I was like, I want to go back and finish Fallout 4.
Yeah.
I've done that stupid thing of what I always do with open world games, which is I get too stuck into the world, I don't experience the story enough, and I need to go back because Fallout games are fantastic. I never played 76. We were talking a bit about it before the show, and there's a lot, I think, there's a lot of legwork that 76 needs to do before I make that leap. But yes. I'd be happy to go and give 4 another bit of a run, just for maybe this is too mean. Stop me if you think I'm being really out of order. But just as a comparison, the current Steam concurrence for Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League looking back the past 2 weeks are, about between 500 and 750. So just compare that to the weekly averages for Fallout 4, a game which has been out for years.
Yeah.
That was too mean, wasn't it? I shouldn't have done. It's the numbers were blowing my mind. I'm like, there's so many people still playing Fallout 4, yet how can Suicide Squad not scrape off some of those people? Just needs a few thousand.
I know you mean.
Feel bad.
But I mean, I do kind of feel bad for them as well. But at the same time, as someone who tried to play more Suicide Squad inside the last week or two, I haven't talked about it on the podcast because I didn't really want to sit here and just be negative about a game I've already been negative about. But I jumped on, wanted to see if I had enough patience to unlock the Joker. I didn't have enough patience to unlock the Joker, and I uninstalled the game again without even getting to the point where I could play as him. So, at the moment, as someone who has like completely severed my relationship with Suicide Squad, and I think this would be the case even if the Fallout TV show hadn't just launched, I'm far more likely to play a Fallout game on any given weekend at this stage than I am Suicide Squad. So I kind of see where the numbers are coming from. But by the same token, I do agree that they are, even, pre-boost, were surprisingly strong.
I should just say that in the chat, Kath Games has said 76, they have actually done a lot of work, and it's a very different game now, and you should give it. They're implying you should maybe give it a chance. Maybe.
So the first thing I was going to ask is, because obviously you, like a lot of people, have instinctively targeted Fallout 4 as the game you're going to use to kind of go back into the world of Fallout 3. Yeah. Are you interested in waiting for this next-gen patch, or do you think you're going to start prior to then, and that's just going to be a bonus where halfway through your sessions the frame rate's going to double, or and how are you going to navigate that?
So my plan will be to wait for the patch. Like I said, I've got it on PlayStation. I've got it on. Is it a paid for update, or is it a?
No, it is a free patch that will be released for Xbox Series X and S on PS5 on April 25th. Experience up to 60 frames a second, very cleverly worded, very nice, and increased resolution. It doesn't really talk about what else is going on there. PC players will also receive a free update, which includes widescreen and ultra widescreen support, as well as some fixes to the creation kit. It's also going to get Steam Deck verified, and it's going to be released on Epic Game Store. So it feels like they're just kind of dotting the I's, crossing the T's, to be honest, when it comes to making sure Fallout 4 is future-proofed. I
know it doesn't make any sense, and I know everyone in the chat and everyone watching this is going to think, probably every time I say this, thinks I'm an idiot. But I like playing games like on my PC. I have no issue with it. I have no problem with keyboard and mouse. But I just prefer sitting on my sofa with my big TV and my surround sound system and lounging and just like having a drink alongside you and some snacks and that, like, I like that experience. And I know I could set up my PC and whatever to connect and do whatever, but I don't need to because I've got my PlayStation 5 for that. And I know that I could just, it's like, well, you could just play a better experience and do it on your PC right now because you've got Fallout 4 on your PC. I just enjoy that, and so I don't know. It's a weird thing.
You're not going to get any grief from me for that. To be honest, that's the same way I functioned for a long time, and I did experiment with some HDMI tomfoolery at some point to have my PC.
We've all been there, mate. We've all done it.
Yeah, it just didn't last. They sit in different places. It just didn't. It wasn't to me.
Yeah, but so no, I will. I'll wait for that update, and then I will. I'll try and put a fork in a couple of other games that I'm playing at the moment before I take the leap, and then we'll see where we're at.
Yes, we are, like, depending on your taste.
Because I'll have to start again. I'll have to go right back to the beginning. Like, it's been too long.
I'm kind of excited by that prospect. Like, I can't remember the last time I started a new game on Fallout 4, but it was a little while ago. And one thing I do know, and this is probably the same for you, is that whilst I have started a new game prior to my initial run through of Fallout 4, my second run through didn't get me particularly far through the game. So there's lots of stuff that I have, like, very distant memories of. Like, what it is for me is remembering buddying up with Nick Valentine, who was my favorite companion in that game, and some of the quests and adventures we went on together. And then thinking, oh God, I can barely remember them. And then remembering thinking that's, well, yeah, because they were 9 years ago.
Jeez.
That's getting old for you. So yeah, I'm with you. Something to look forward to. But as you pointed, I can't remember who was it who in the chat who shouted out 76.
It was Calf Games.
Calf Games pointed out, of course, Fallout 76 is a game that has undergone a number of, depending on who you ask, radical sort of transformations over the last couple of years, as that game has tried to do everything it could to kind of claw back some dignity and as much of its the Fallout sort of reputation as possible, following what was a pretty nasty release for that title. And
that you live streamed.
Yeah, but the funny thing is that live stream you're talking about and that you remember so fondly was years after the game came out.
Was it?
Yeah. I didn't mention this before we went live.
Okay. In my memory, it's like the game came out and then it was like a couple of days after you live streamed it.
No, because Fallout 76, as a reminder for myself and folks at home, came out in October of 2018. You and I were still deeply ingrained in all-time gaming, and of course we actually, for our sins, did some sponsored content for Fallout 76, which didn't do us any favors when the game ended up being the game that it was.
Some of the most fun content we made on that channel, though. I really enjoyed doing that, so it was good.
Yeah, there was some good time, and again, not to dig up, dead bodies, decomposing or fully decomposed at this stage bodies, but we were making sponsored content on we didn't know as we didn't there were elements of that game that weren't to be known by the major public, us included, until they were released to the wider public, and we could all see some of those things for what they were, given the context of a game where, like, the servers were up and they were live and everyone could see that game actually for what it was. But as I mentioned, it has been changing a lot over the years. They famously kind of added NPCs and kind of quest lines back into the game, something that was actually kind of weirdly missing at launch. lot of updates. There was a battle royale at one point. I just remember that trailer from one of those E3s or something like that. It isn't being returned to by as many people as are returning to Fallout 4, Jonesy, but it is being returned to by a record-breaking number of people, seemingly. And given that you can, I think, still play that game for free on Xbox Game Pass, for example, I'm sure there are going to be plenty of people who say, hey, I want my Fallout fix. Rather than start a new game on Fallout 4, which is something I've done 7 times already, I might play 76 for the first time. It could be great for the game. Has any of it created or sort of mustered up any interest for you?
Yeah. No, like it has to some degree, but like I said, I was surprised that this past week, most of the conversations I'd seen on X were people talking about how good 76 was and how 76 was actually, you know, a fantastic world, and they'd actually done a really good job of building it, and that some people need to you know, experience it because it specifically because it, you know, it had been improved from when it had originally launched. But I found that bizarre. Like, that was the conversation that was going on, but that's really good. Like, I like to hear that. I like to hear that you know, things have improved and people are really enjoying it. And so, but the only reason it wasn't really on my radar and I immediately went to 4 was purely because I've played 4 and I know more about what's going on. And it was just like, is it a good time to get into 76 now? Is it too late? Is it, you know, are there still people? But apparently there are loads of people playing it. So there we go.
Yeah, and like now more so than ever before. And also apparently that the Fallout 76 community, and I don't know if there's something that is changing kind of as it grows, but apparently it's a pretty friendly one. A lot of people using what would be, you know, antagonistic borderline PvP scenarios to actually help other players and help new players and things like that. I think Phil Spencer was even like weirdly into Fallout 76 for a while, like because a lot of his public his profile stuff on Xbox is public, so you can see. For reference, Jonesy, I think that stream that you're referencing, so for anyone that doesn't know the kind of the backstory here. Friend of the podcast, Steph Murphy, and I streamed a couple of sessions of Fallout 76 during lockdown, following one of its sort of like bigger updates and additions to kind of get a.
That was during lockdown.
Yeah, so that was
weird,
following.
okay. Wow.
That was following the release of the Wastelanders expansion,
right?
I believe sometime around April or May of 2020. Because I streamed it, right, and I streamed for about in like 5 months in total from like April to September of 2020.
My memory was that you guys streamed it when we were in the ATG days. That's what I was thinking.
Right.
No, okay, fair enough. It was after.
That's why you were at home.
Oh yeah, right, watching it. Yeah, of course. That makes sense.
As opposed to being at work behind the scenes. Yes, but it has had other additions and expansions since then, and so you know I'll take people at face value. I'm sure there definitely is something to Fallout 76 at this stage, but I don't know. I'd still feel more inclined to go back to Fallout 4. That being said, Jonesy, there is one Fallout game that I would not go back to under any circumstances, but I am apparently deeply alone in that fact. Maybe this is the case for people who are watching the show and find themselves without a PC or a console capable of playing any of the Fallout games we're discussing. And that's one of Fallout's biggest success stories in the wake of the show, Fallout Shelter. For anyone that doesn't remember, this was the what was initially a mobile game, a free-to-play mobile game, you know, all above board, developed, you know, in-house by Bethesda, I believe, or at least published by Bethesda, that saw you managing the day-to-day goings-on of a vault and its many dwellers and inhabitants. It did get re-released, I believe, at some point on the Switch, and I think there might have been a console version as well, but it's always primarily been seen as a mobile game. Jonesy, Fallout Shelter is doing really well all of a sudden. Some data collated by Layer Licensing and then shared with gamesindustry.biz has suggested that revenue for the mobile spin-off game rose from just over $20,000 on April 10th, 2024, which was the day the show debuted, to $80,000 by April 13th. Again, Yeah, so that is a quadruple in terms of a quadrupling of the revenue generated on what was already quite a lot of revenue. Like the idea that Fallout Shelter was just sat there quietly earning 20 grand a day kind of pisses me off.
Madness.
Yeah, like you think because do you even remember like in that game you buy like lunch boxes with those cards in them, and they did like perks and like
Yeah, no,
where are they making $20,000 a day from?
I'm trying
And
to
how is it
think.
80?
I'm trying to think because I played quite a lot of Fallout Shelter. It was one of those ones where I played too much of it, and then I was like, this is mental. I'm wasting all of my time, and so I just completely 86'd it. Like I got rid of the whole thing, didn't look back, never spent any real money on it. Because I think it was one of those where I looked and I was like, I'm not doing anything. This is completely pointless, and I'm spending hours just sorting out my shelter. The only thing I can't really remember how that game functions. All I was thinking was, is that because you're spending real money to use energy so that you can do more stuff in your shelter and expand it further and stuff? But I don't really remember.
I explicitly remember Todd Howard almost promoting it by saying it wasn't one of those energy drain games.
Right.
But it did have microtransactions. All I remember is there being lunch boxes of varying.
Maybe I'll have to download Fallout Shelter.
And you opened lunch boxes and they had these cards in them, but I can't remember what the cards buffed or did necessarily. All I can tell you is that people are spending $80,000 a day at the moment on Fallout Shelter. And similarly, the number of downloads per day rose from 20,000 to over 60,000 per day within the 3 days following the show's launch. Apparently, Fallout Shelter also rose to number 7 on the US iOS top 3 games chart, which is the highest position the game has held since June of 2018. That, for anyone wondering, was when the game got a boost of awareness following the announcement that it would come to PS4 and Switch. So highest chart position it's had for almost 6 years since its last kind of boost of since the last time anyone made any noise about it, really. And I suppose, Jonesy, what those numbers there stand as a reminder of is that, you know, if the numbers are to be believed, we are rapidly approaching the point where there are 3 billion mobile gamers out there of some description. And when you get to that number, when there are 3 billion people out there who are playing mobile games, then yeah, 20,000 people can be downloading Fallout Shelter at any given point, and any number of those people could be spending between $20,000 and $80,000 a day on Fallout Shelter at any point. You have to kind of just tear up the record books when we're talking about the mobile market these days.
We'll make it 60,001 because I've just downloaded Fallout Shelter back onto my phone to have a little look.
Here we go. He's a part of the problem, folks.
And he always has been.
Yeah. But I suppose, Jonesy, just to put a positive spin on it, it's a testament to kind of the rousing kind of uplift in popularity and interest and intrigue a franchise or a series can feel when you put something good out there into the world that exists within that stratosphere. And that's exactly what the show is for so many people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's a weird thing these days as well, in that we can almost feel like games fail sometimes to achieve like what we want them to achieve, and that's often no fault of the game or the developer or the publisher, and it's just not quite what we wanted. But actually now with like TV and film doing some of that heavy lifting as well, you can get a little bit of that of that feel without necessarily it being tied to a game that might not do it for you, which I quite like. I quite like the fact that you can get a little bit of that dopamine hit from that world that you enjoy without necessarily even playing the game. It's just like, because these franchises are so cool and so fun, and sometimes it is rough when it's tied to like a massive game, like a big Bethesda game that's got to do a whole load of shit, and if it doesn't quite get it, you then know that you've got to wait a decade before you see something else. But actually, if there can be a TV show tied to it, if there can be multiple series of that TV show, if there can be apps tied to it, it's all just something to keep that franchise alive for you, which I like. I think is a good thing.
Absolutely, and I think this is also going to become one of those things where the increase in popularity and revenue generating opportunities around a franchise will inevitably now become an even bigger bullet point on the PowerPoints and presentations that are being drawn up the world over for as companies look to adapt more video game properties. And the other thing that's going to be really interesting is seeing which franchises are able to tap into this opportunity and which ones aren't. Because we're at a point now where, when video game movies like the Super Mario Brothers movie can make over $1 billion at the box office, and shows like this can do great numbers for Amazon, but also for the game makers in tow, you've kind of got the push from the game makers who want to capitalize on their IP as much as possible, and the pull from the people in the TV and the film production universe, who of course are now invested in getting these things made. That being said, like, one almost immediate litmus test that I think might come up with some interesting results is whether or not we spend the month of August talking about the amazing resurgence and the number of concurrent players of any given Borderlands game we see. Somehow I don't think it's going to have quite the same impact. And then we might get into some interesting kind of links between the quality of the product and the kind of the positive sentiments it sparks within an audience.
I think you could.
They're allowed to go in and take that onto another platform.
I do think it's possible. Like, I think it's less likely, as you've said. I think, but I suppose maybe that's because is it because of what the game is? Like, but I think there's every opportunity for Borderlands to capitalize on it as well. Like, I think
there'll be a pop, but I don't think we'll see this.
No, I agree with you. I don't think it'll be this level. But that's because we're assuming that the Borderlands film, is not going to be of a quality of the Fallout series, which is the big difference. And I agree. I think I agree with you from what I've seen. But hey, we may be completely wrong. It may be an absolute banger.